Welcome to Reflections on Identity, a podcast series exploring educators' narratives on their professional identity. Today, we're talking to Andrew Mitchell, who is an Associate Dean in Higher Education. Andrew, we always start this part of the podcast by asking people to talk a little bit about their role. So, would you be able to just briefly do that for us?
Of course, yeah, no problem at all. So I'm an associate dean in a faculty of education, English and sport at the University of Bedfordshire, and I have two areas of focus within my role. One of those is quality assurance. So that'd be things like new course development, assessment changes. And then the second aspect would be international partnerships. So that has a recruitment, but also a franchise and a validated partner kind of role associated within it. So two main focuses, quality and international. And then in addition to that, I'm an associate professor in biomechanics within the Institute of Sport and Physical Activity Research. And I supervise PhD students and collaborate on research with colleagues within my own institution, but then also across the world. And then I sit on two PSRB boards. So firstly, which is the British Association of Sport and Exercise Science. So I'm on the board because I'm the chair of the Division of Biomechanics at BASES. And then I'm also on the Executive Council of the International Ankle Consortium, which is a global research consortium focusing in and around ankle sprains. And prior to that, I was a head of school for sports science and physical activity for about 10 years.
Welcome, Andrew. That's quite a mix, isn't it, in terms
Yes.
of roles? I'm just wondering, how does your role influence your professional identity?
Yes, I think it does. I think for every role I've secured in my career, I think my professional identity has been a significant factor in the appointment. So I do believe they're inextricably linked. Um, Now, when I teach undergraduate or postgraduate students or interact with my PhD students, I do so with much more insight than I did when I was straight out of my PhD back in the 90s. And that's not a criticism of 25-year-old me. It simply reflects that, I guess, my growth over the period of time, but also changes within the sector and society. As a head of school, I made a conscious choice to remain a unit leader for a level 6 unit and to continue to teach a level 7 and to supervise dissertations. And that way I felt I could continue to interact with students and continue to learn from them and remain current on a human level. Now, as an associate dean, I'm not allowed to have my own unit anymore, so I had to give that one up. But I step in for guest lectures and fill in for staff illnesses whilst retaining my PhD students. But when I teach now, once I introduce myself, I do feel that students interact with me in a slightly different way, a very positive way. And on reflection, I think that is perhaps about trust or allyship, but they definitely kind of treat me differently. I do feel as they would have done maybe 10 years ago if I was simply just a normal lecture.
Okay. I think from your answer there, you've partly answered my next question, which was whether identity was important to you in your role. So I think I'm probably going to ask in what ways.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely. But I don't necessarily see my professional identity as very different to my personal identity. And in preparing to come on this podcast, I've been thinking about that quite a lot. The traits I'm proud to display, such as kind of integrity, humility, empathy, are as important to me as a parent, a colleague, a PhD supervisor, mentor, line manager, as they would be as an associate dean sat in a meeting with international partner. Um, but I am very conscious that it's multifaceted, and whilst you've got your kind of technical knowledge that you take into meetings or take into scenarios or onto projects, but also those personal values and those ethical considerations are really, really important. But I'm aware that it's a constantly evolving process that's shaped by new experiences, new challenges, and then reflections on on one's own practice. But I do feel like that a strong professional identity can influence your teaching approaches. And as I mentioned earlier, I think for me, I do feel that it influences the relationship I have with students when I do get back into the classroom.
So, how much influence do you think you've had as an individual, or has your identity been shaped by the role? Maybe a bit of both.
Yeah, I believe yeah, so I think because I have multiple roles, I
Mm.
think it's a kind of a constantly moving picture. So I believe that um, you've got kind of your role and your professional identity. I guess they're distinct but codependent. So again, on reflection in preparing for this pod, I was having to think about that, and I think that my professional identity is somewhat like a Venn diagram with lots of different aspects within it, but almost in 3D form. And that 3D form is influenced by perspective, context, situation, experience, and within that is my role, which calls for varying aspects of that professional identity to surface throughout the working day. So that Venn diagram is never static and it's always evolving, even if the role kind of remains constant. So it's kind of on a weekly basis, it's influenced by projects I'm on, research I'm in, a mentorship meeting, a line manager meeting, interacting with internal, external organizations, national, international meetings, professional organizations, PSRBs. And I think you get better at interacting in those environments as your professional experience and your personal experience develop. But also you learn you learn from the people you're working within in those meetings, and you can kind of see aspects or traits that you think that you'd like to develop yourself, or things that you think, oh gosh, I'm never going to say that. That didn't come across very well from that individual in the meeting. Sometimes you hear, but also kind of observing and learning from others. But I guess in the end, it comes down to a reflection, or kind of a critical examination, or an honest reflection of how you did in a certain environment, and whether you would do the same thing if it all happened again. So yeah.
So it sounds like other people, maybe in a limited way, I don't know if it is limited. It sounds like other people have had quite an influence in terms of you have in those interactions reflected, and then that's possibly further shaped your identity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would say it's consistently modified, adapted, influenced by external individuals. So internally, it would be at my own institution, it'd be the academics, professors, but equally technical professional staff, support staff, estates team, PGRs, taught students. Whereas externally, it would be much more influenced by research collaborators, colleagues in industry, board members, and non-exec directors that sit on the boards I'm involved with. Whereas personally, it would be influenced by parents, friends, sister, wife, and daughter. A few close friends, and definitely one or two sports coaches that have significantly influenced me over the years. And then a little bit more historically to that, I've been significantly influenced by the medical staff at Great Ormond Street Hospital and Guy's Hospital. So I spent a lot of my childhood in hospital with some number of surgeries, 27 surgeries over the years. But I think being involved or being surrounded by a really diverse, multidisciplinary team everywhere, from the healthcare workers all the way through to the medics, the consultants, the nurses, physios, that really influenced me, because I grew up in a predominantly white little coastal town in Sussex, but I was in hospital in London in a ward full of international practitioners and experts, and that significantly changed my outlook, which I think is a positive thing.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Some really interesting reflections there. I'm going to hand over to Neil to see if he has any further questions.
I suppose one of the things we tend to ask people as well, Andrew, is do you think there's any kind of challenges or cases where your identity has had to come up with some resisted to sort of institutions or organizations? Is there any time when there's been those kind of difficulties around your identity and the work you've had to do, and perhaps the people you've had to work with, without mentioning names?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that those challenges come with progressing in your career and being given more and more complex tasks as part of your job description. For example, in a week or in one day, I was looking at my diary from last week. So in one day, I was chairing an online international conference, but it was an online. So chairing the keynote lecture, which was lovely and had a certain draw on my skills and my professional identity. I then had an accreditation meeting with the PSRB to accredit a degree. In the same day, I was carrying out an interview as part of a grievance investigation for HR, and then I was sitting in a one-to-one meeting with a PGR student. So in every single one of those, different aspects of my professional identity had to come to the fore, and others would be completely pushed to the back and the interaction with the PGR student, obviously very, very different to a grievance investigation. But I think, fortunately, I haven't had any situations where I feel like my professional identity is challenged, because that's maybe one reason I love academia, because of the systematic process of it all. And there's templates for everything, and there's processes for everything, and there's forms for everything. And I kind of like that security and safety. So I think that the context for the context for how your professional identity is being challenged or questioned is super important. And again, it's I guess the way out of that is adaptive communication, making sure you're very, very clear. And I guess I am not concerned, I am aware of ensuring that everyone gets what they need to get out of the meeting within reason. You obviously don't just concede for the sake of it, but making sure everyone has a voice. Because quite often, especially now with online Teams meetings, it's very, very easy for people to be at a meeting, be important stakeholders, but not be confident enough to raise their hand digitally and virtually to actually get their point across. And I'm very, very conscious of making sure everyone's voice is heard.
Andrew, thank you so much for your time and very honest and interesting discussion around how you perceive yourself and your identity. So thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Yes. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Carol.
You have been listening to Reflections on Identity. We hope you can join us for the next episode in our series. Click on the bell icon or follow for notifications, and we'd love to hear from you. So please put your thoughts in the comments. Bye for now.